Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of the final 3 episodes of Star Wars Andor, Season 2 episodes 10, 11, and 12, filled with tension, despair, hope, and gut punches. We must break down this finale, scene by scene, for the Star Wars Easter eggs and connections, details you missed, and the deeper layers of meaning. And be sure to check out nerdriot.shop, because if K2SO was the one thing to cheer you up from this finale, we got you covered with a K2SO Rescued shirt, as well as a Palpatine Master of Puppets design. Grabbing one of these is the best way to support us here at New Rockstars. All right, the final 3 episodes open again with a 1 year later tag and the Ferrix Anvil Gong. We are now in 1 BBY, the final stretch before the critical events of Rogue One that lead into A New Hope. There's been some confusion over whether Rogue One's events are in 1 BBY or 0 BBY, since they are all roughly within the same few weeks of the Battle of Yavin, but the official Star Wars Timelines book from 2023 said that Rogue One, and thus these final 3 episodes of Andor, are all in 1 BBY, leaving A New Hope alone in 0 BBY. So, you know, whatever. We open on this light flashing on the fractal radio drawer in the back of the antique shop operated by Luthen and Clea. In this opening frame, they were sure to include one of the Temple of Doom Sankara stones that they included in Season 1 as a Lucasfilm Easter egg. Later, Luthen will claim there are 2 things in the shop known to be forgeries, and I think it's at least 2, because we got those stones, plus Indiana Jones' whip and carbonite, and those Lothal Jedi Temple tablets from Rebels that should not be in the shop. And for any of you doubters saying that those are the same tablets, we got a close-up of them this way, with the hands exactly the same. They wanted it to be an Easter egg, but it can't be Ezra's tablets. Anyway, blinking lights in quiet Coruscant rooms will prove critical in this final arc. We'll later learn that Luthen, Clea, and Lonnie called this special communication ping the Big Bell, a one-time break-the-glass emergency line that Lonnie could use when the jig is up. And I like how the Big Bell kind of reflects the opening sound of the Ferrix Anvil Gong, as thematically they're serving a similar purpose. And that purpose is, now is a time to act. Clea arms herself with a blaster. One of the pistols she doesn't take was a DL-44, the same model Han and Luke both used in the original trilogy. Luthen places on his costume, rings, and wig one last time and plans to meet Clea at the old steps.
Promise me if it doesn't look perfect, you won't engage.
I think we used up all the perfect.
I love this line because it's Luthen's way of saying that they only got so many lucky breaks, but also that his life with his daughter figure, Clea, up until this point has been the closest thing to perfect he can imagine. The way Clea looks back at him on this line, she's never looked more like just a little girl looking up at a dad. They meet, and Lonnie mourns Luthen that Dedra Meero has put together a tactical team for a Coruscant operation, something that she probably would only do if she found access. Lonnie says he's been burned, that they're onto him after he used Dedra's code cert to read her private files, meaning Lonnie went beyond what Luthen ever told him to do. Like, Lonnie worried that Luthen would tell him to do it if he told him that he had this access, but he never did tell Luthen that. Lonnie acted on his own. Had Lonnie not done this, they would have never gotten this critical contextual information that they needed for their operation in Rogue One. So Luthen's big speech to Lonnie back in Season 1 about how he burned his life must have stirred something in this guy, because now he has burned his own life. Lonnie doesn't expect to make it out alive himself. He just wants to secure the safety of his wife and daughter. Lonnie spills the beans that the Emperor's energy program is a lie. Gorman was a front to strip mine the planet for the calcite mineral that they're going to use to coat reactor lenses, and that the Jedha occupation isn't about looking for partisans, but rather to get the Kyber crystals. In Rogue One, we'll see how Saw Gerrera's group, the Partisans, fight Imperial forces on Jedha, a planet with an ancient connection to the Jedi Order that, like the planet Ilum, has natural Kyber crystals that, in addition to powering lightsabers, power the Death Star super laser. Scarif is where the Death Star is currently being completed, so this tells us that the Rebels knew something was happening on Scarif, but we know that Scarif also came up in ISB briefings in Season 1 where Lonnie Young attended. And we later find out that Legrette's brother is stationed on Scarif, and they kind of found out about it that way. But before Lonnie goes further, he demands to know where his family will go, and Luthen thinks for a moment before saying Yavin, which Lonnie doesn't even know is a planet. So from this line, we can assume that Luthen isn't gonna let this guy walk away. Lonnie Young is revealed to be dead as the dude walking his Tuca has it run over to Lonnie's corpse and meow and sniff. Tucas are the feline creatures of Star Wars, one of their variants being the Lothcats of Lothal. And if you look closely, this Tuca's collar reads Pix, P-I-X, named after a recently deceased dog of one of the VFX artists. After everything Lonnie Young did, it's sad to see him in this way, knowing his wife and kid are somewhere waiting for him. He won't be the only link in this chain whose woman and child are left looking at a sunrise that he will never see. Clea quickly repeats back the important names and details.
Gorman, Scarif, Kyber, Krennic, Erso.
Galen Erso, Galen.
Engineer, Galen Erso. Superweapon, Based in Scarif, fuel from Gorman.
Engineer Galen Erso was the key detail that Lonnie added off screen. Mads Mikkelsen's character from Rogue One, father to Jyn Erso, the scientist whom Orson Krennic forced to work for Project Stardust, who discovered that Kyber crystals could be used for the Death Star's super laser. The information that Cassian gets from Tivik at the start of the Rogue One film on the Rings of Kafrene from Imperial defector Bodhi Rook, Riz Ahmed's character, was that the Empire was building a planet killer using the Kyber crystals, and that Erso was part of the project. And we now see why and how Cassian at the beginning of that movie knew the name Galen Erso to begin with. This is how Cassian first gets that name, so that Tivik's tip from Bodhi's leak doesn't get dismissed as yet another theory. They needed this information to come from two different independent sources so that they could act on it. And of course, the name Galen Erso will be what leads them to find Jyn Erso, his daughter, who will be critical to learning how the project's name is called Stardust when they steal the plans from Scarif, because, you know, Stardust was like his nickname for her. Really, this entire arc is like an extended Rogue One Tantive 4 killbox sequence, a chain of rebels passing off critical Death Star related information, one to the next, as the Empire slowly marches toward to kill them just as they transfer that information with the last bit of life in their bodies. Now we see how that sacrificial chain extended even further back, starting with Lonnie Young and Dedra Meero and whoever the mystery email forwarder was. The burn Luthen talked about before was melting all of the links of their fractal radio switchboard to the various rebel cells that Luthen and Clea had built in their network. We see a close-up of that acid oozing across the nodes, and it kind of reflects the way Partagaz calls this insurrection a disease, something he cannot stop from spreading. The doorbell rings and it's Dedra Meero alone. Both engage in a little dance despite knowing how this will end.
Is everything real?
At the moment, only 2 pieces of questionable provenance in the gallery. Any guesses?
Haha, love the wordplay here because the two of them are the 2 pieces of questionable authenticity in this room right now. Luthen shows Dedra a Nautolan bleeder. So Nautolans are the amphibious species of Jedi Master Kit Fisto, one of the Jedi who tried to arrest Palpatine, who was immediately oofed. So that kind of makes Kit Fisto also a Nautolan bleeder. So this ceremonial dagger plus the Keldor mask that was moved to the back this episode since Clea passed it earlier. If that mask was Plo Koon's mask, that would make 2 possible belongings of Jedi Masters who were killed during Revenge of the Sith. Dedra takes out her stunning item, the weathered Imperial Starpath unit. This is a navigation tool that Cassian stole from Steerguard before the events of the series that he tried to sell to Luthen Rael, but when Cyril's group tried to arrest Cassian, that unit was left at the scene and recovered by the Empire, which caught Dedra Meero's attention. So she's always held on to this as like kind of a relic, waiting for this day to happen. And just by showing Luthen this, she proves that she knows he was the other man on barracks that day, the Axis she's been looking for, been dreaming of. So how did Dedra find Luthen? Well, in the next episode, episode 11, she tells Krennic that a partisan spy was outed on Jedha, who confessed under torture that he was recruited by a man with a Fondor Hallcraft full of antiquities, which she found in the intel that was accidentally forwarded to her. That info led her to Luthen. But the series does leave the question, who forwarded this file to Dedra Meero? Was it someone who did it on purpose? Some other mystery figure in the Imperial ranks who wanted someone else to get this information? Or is it the case, and I hope this is the case, that the Empire truly was brought down by a mistakenly forwarded email? Wouldn't that be just perfect? Now Luthen and Dedra drop the facade. Dedra says he disgusts her, and he says it's because he wants freedom, and she says he just wants chaos. But he says the rebellion is everywhere now.
There's a whole galaxy out there waiting to disgust you.
Dedra sees the smoking fractal radio, and Luthen cuts himself.
Turn around or be stunned.
Remember, Dedra earlier worried that her item wouldn't be stunning enough, and now it's Luthen's final stroke that leaves her stunned. And I love this because it also proves that since this Nautolan bleeder supposedly was used for ceremonial sacrifices, it is now clearly sharp enough, meaning that it was a real authentic piece. Also, yeah, had Dedra just raided the shop with her tactical team, she probably would have salvaged more of the switchboard and captured Luthen alive, but because she had to gloat with her big routine, her big win was foiled. And the moment she realizes what Luthen has done, she realizes she is so now there's no big prize to justify her overstepping. The Imperial CSI team sweeps the crime scene, and we see how they're scanning that Lothal tablet, same as we, the viewers, do when we're trying to determine if this actually was Ezra Bridger's tablet from Rebels. Clea remembers the day she met Luthen during some past conflict. Now, it doesn't specify when or where this is, but assuming the Empire is only 18 years old since the Purge started on 19 BBY, I'm thinking this would have been a Clone Wars conflict, unless, like with Dedra's Imperial Kindergarten line, Tony Gilroy might have just forgotten that the Empire started in 19 BBY and forgotten that we've only been about 14 or 18 years after that, and Dedra and Clea seem to be in their 30s. Now, according to the show's production, the uniforms are meant to be Mud Trooper uniforms, Imperial Mud Trooper uniforms. The Imperial uniforms worn by Han Solo in Solo: A Star Wars Story, a movie that was set in 10 BBY, 5 years before Andor started and 9 years before the present day of Andor. And I just think everyone working on this show, really everyone at Lucasfilm, is kind of pretending like the Imperial era lasted like 50 years, when in reality, it went from 19 BBY to 4 ABY, so like 23 years. But we see a de-aged Stellan Skarsgård as Sergeant Lear, overseeing a group of soldiers killing civilians in cabins. But if his name was Sergeant Lear, he would have just rearranged the letters of L-E-A-R to get Real. And there's probably a connection to Shakespeare's King Lear, the tragedy of the king who couldn't trust his daughters and had to be blinded in order to gain the proper vision to respect his daughter. The name Lear in that play was even wordplay by Shakespeare on the word leer, as in to gaze at. And by transforming that to Real, Luthen made himself a real person, something of authentic value, like one of the truly valuable antiquities in his shop. He says, "Make it stop," with regards to the screams of the women and children, recalling for me Bix being tortured with the sounds of the Dyzonite children's screams. And he repeats the phrase Rosh ni Lutz, which I assume is make it stop in whatever his native Star Wars language is. Sergeant Lear finds young Clea, one of the refugees of this war crime, hiding on a ship. And so we learn his defection from military service, and his whole life from here forward was all inspired by his heart melting upon seeing this girl. And so Clea, now as an adult, feels responsible to not let this man be tortured on her behalf. She finds the hospital, and the Orbesh on the building translates to this hospital being named after Lina So. Ha! Lina So was the Supreme Chancellor during the relatively recently released High Republic books. She presided over the period of history when the Great Hyperspace Disaster happened hundreds of years prior to now. So that means Coruscant named a hospital after this historical leader who would have gotten some historical credit for the relief and recovery efforts after that disaster. The jailbreak puck that Clea uses employs the same kind of practical rotary gears as what we see in the original design of the Scomp Link that R2-D2 uses on the Death Star. We instinctively just know this is what it looks like in Star Wars when a lock is picked. Clea wears some stolen nurse scrubs, which have a canary yellow design that both recalls the High Republic gold tones of the era of the person this hospital was named after, and just has a pleasant pastel with a Y-shaped collar that just gives off a nice bedside manner. She passes a patient in a Bacta tank, the healing tanks that we've seen throughout Star Wars since Empire. This patient could be a Saurian, that's the tall-headed species of Kiadi Mundi, but this guy's pointed ears do look more like a Quarren, but I have to ask, would a Quarren need a breathing mask in a Bacta tank? We also see a patient in a medical gown where the tail pokes out of the butt flap, which I just love. Clea pushes an elderly patient who's very confused and very sweet. There's some debate among our team over whether this patient could be a very, very old Asogian, the species of ET, which thanks to a cameo in the Phantom Menace in the Senate is technically Star Wars canon. I don't think it is, because the shape of the head is different and I'm not seeing the length on the neck or the fingers. But we have seen this species before though. Some other golden girls of this species were sunbathing on a bench on Niamos when Cassian walked past them in season 1. But I still love everything this patient does, from her confused grunts to playfully kicking her legs later. On that last one, the captions read, Granny scatting. There's also an astromech droid behind her, projected a 3D scan of the human brain, but the scatting and the music of all this, like I might be wrong, but the elevator music might have been the Niamos theme of the series, but just like a gentle elevator music version of it. Noah also pointed out that the scatting kind of sounds like the Cantina song. Is she going like It's also kind of like the Star Wars Episode 1 Racer game menu where you can hear Watto scatting the Cantina song. If you know, you know. Clea flashes back to another memory of the first year that she and Luthen were moving as nomads and beginning to build this collection of antiquities by trading up stuff that they probably stole. They already have this routine where Clea plays the bad cop with the pawnbroker, refusing to even take a higher offer for a smile, and mentioning a thief back by the gate who gave a higher offer. I assume Zuli, or rather Suli, might have been who they swindled this artifact from. And Clea asks,
Am I your daughter now?
What is she used for?
I have to think about that.
Even now, negotiating with Luthen in this transaction of their relationship. Luthen says that they're now confined to living under aliases.
We'll be whoever we have to. It won't always be up to us. I'm Luthen now, you're Clea.
A second flashback shows Luthen and Clea slightly older and less scraggly, now pawning what Luthen calls a Deveronian victory necklace. Deveronians are the devil-looking species that first appeared in the 1977 film in the Cantina. We're now in the Imperial era for sure, as we learn a trooper was killed by a sniper, and they keep finding people who did it. Oh man, Clea sees among the innocent citizens a child, and all of them are executed in a stormtrooper firing squad. This Hilltown marketplace was shot at, I might be mispronouncing this, Jedha Castle, a medieval stronghold located 1 hour south of Valencia, Spain. This place looks awesome. I want to visit. Luthen explains to Clea that by walking away, they are winning the long game, but it requires them to lose and lose and lose until they're ready.
All you know now is how much you hate. You bank that, you hide that, you keep it alive until you know what to do with it.
And I love how this scene ends with Luthen saying, "When I tell you to move, move." And Clea obediently, Simon says this, freezing until Luthen barks, "Move!" Now back in the present for a moment, it looks like Clea is gonna detonate a bomb on the entire hospital floor like Walter freaking White, but we flash back to another memory, the bougiest outing yet for these two, showing how they really have traded up to the 1%. This planet is Naboo. They shot this scene at the same Hever Castle in the district of Kent, England, where in 1997, George Lucas shot a scene for The Phantom Menace that would ultimately be removed from the theatrical cut, where Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Jar Jar enter the Theed Royal Palace grounds after escaping the waterfall. Pretty ballsy for Luthen to make this kind of terroristic move on Palpatine's home world, but maybe that was the point. Clea has ice cream with berries and blue purulines. Like many pastries and desserts we've seen in Star Wars, like the cookies Grogu eats, they are blue because the butter used to make them is churned from blue bantha milk. Remember, we saw Clea eating blue butter or blue cream cheese on her toast in past episode. Luthen demonstrates the cost and the weight of being an actual terrorist, counting the Imperials on the bridge and taking in the peace and the calm of the people around her that they're about to disrupt, including a little boy talking to his parents. She always notices the kids because she's a kid. Luthen explains how most people ignore the realities of fascism all around them, but Clea must feel the weight of the choice and know that it's a choice. Luthen didn't tell her whether today's test was real or not because he's afraid of burning her humanity out of her. So at the last second, he hits the button.
Look at me.
A little practical tip. A normal person would not be looking at the troopers before the bomb went off. They would turn to look at them after the explosion. Where you are looking is how you identify yourself. Clea applies that with the hospital security cameras later, looking not at the camera, but just naturally away. That makes her harder to identify.
It's like she's turning away.
So Clea detonates the Imperial transports, creating a diversion, and we follow her in a single shot as she uses her pistol to blast a stormtrooper and then the final guard. And Clea finds Luthen on a respirator and detaches it. The tube gives off a little steam, reminding me of the Rito fumes that Saw Gerrera likened with the soul of his sister Steela. We're seeing the kind of combustible fumes of Luthen's rebel soul leaving his body and spreading everywhere. This episode opened with a blinking light on a console, and that's how we end this episode, with the third of 3 lights on Luthen's gurney blinking to indicate a flat line. We often like to think of the giants of our world going out in a blaze of glory, living up to Dylan Thomas's poem, to rage against the dying of the light. But the truth is, that's not how it ends for most of us. For most of us, it ends in a quiet hospital room just like this, with the soft beeping of instruments as the shell of a loved one we hardly recognize gives one final breath and fades away. On to episode 11. We open on the stormtrooper Clea shot on the 19th floor, as Hirt tells Joy Dani that these were the people Dedra Meero put in charge. Hirt assumes that there must have been 3 operatives, showing how he completely underestimates a single lifelong rebel's skill set. Dedra Meero is in ISB custody. Krennic switches off the recording feed because he's about to talk to Dedra about stuff he does not want on the record anywhere. Krennic asks Dedra what single thing could bring him to this godforsaken basement.
Say it. Say the word.
Death Star.
Dedra knows it not just by the project's internal codename of Stardust, but how they plan to market this battle station to scare the planets. Death Star. Dedra mentions Legrette's brother stationed on Scarif who made comments, and that's probably where she heard that part of it. But Krennic questions Dedra about Lonnie Young.
When did you give him your code cert?
Excuse me? Young. My clearances never.
The way Denise Goff says Young is just so catty, and I love it. While Dedra is right to be defensive about any collusion with Young, Krennic catches her on how the name Galen Erso was in her files to begin with. And here's where she messed up. She was forwarded intel by mistake, and she never reported it because she wanted to snoop through it herself to bypass Imperial compartmentalization in order to find Axis. So that means Dedra had Gorman mining schedules, orbital progress assessments, presumably the Death Star's orbital super laser, Eadu research journals, just another reference to the Eadu lab where Galen Erso works, and 2 years of Jedha work group printouts. This was the torture report of the Jedha partisan embedded as the Moff valet whose confession Dedra used to find Luthen. Krennic says,
Supervisor Young spent 3 hours last night logged into your account.
and the way he jabs his finger down on her head feels like a pantomime of how he wants to use the Death Star on planets. Krennic rages at Dedra that she confronted Luthen alone, rightfully shaming her for letting her ego get the best of her, and Krennic grabs Dedra's head and kind of chokes her, a similar gesture that Cyril used on her on Gorman. And by the end of Rogue One, we're gonna see this dude get force choked. So it's just kind of like everyone in the Empire is doing this to each other, and it's kind of like, yeah, it sucks. Look, if you've made it this far into the video, we know you're a diehard fan, and if you're a collector, you know all too well how good it feels to add a new item to your collection. When you see a limited edition figurine or poster or hardcover art book that you know is gonna be the perfect fit for your shelf, you've gotta get it now before somebody else scoops it up. For those times when you wanna shop, you want Whatnot. Whatnot is a live stream shopping app where you can buy, sell, or auction literally anything. For instance, we just bought a Yavin 4 Rebel base Lego set, a near mint Sentry #1, and a Punisher Funko Pop signed by John Bernthal. Ask you something. You want a Bernthal Funko? You got yourself one. And guess what? They're not for us. They're for you. We are doing a giveaway of these collectibles that we got from Whatnot, sponsored by Whatnot. Just comment down below with your Whatnot username and which item you'd like, and you'll be entered for a chance to win one of these. In the meantime, why not check out Whatnot for yourself? Whatnot Con is happening May 15th to 18th, and it's the ultimate digital con with major moments across comics, toys, and TCG that you do not want to miss. If you use our link to sign up, you'll get $15 off your first purchase, redeemable anywhere on the app. Then you can come back and comment with your username to be entered into the giveaway. Now, this goofy AV dude at the hospital who doesn't understand the gravity of the investigation says Clea used a surgery entrance that they don't have cameras for because the doctors don't like it. I guess these Coruscant doctors might be treating patients that they don't want to be surveilled. I'm assuming Luthen was right and that there is a whole galaxy of people waiting to disgust the Empire. Clea digs out of the safe house an old radio device that functions on a kind of Morse code, later referred to as pulse code by Dedra. Dedra tells here that they found an old radio on Ferrix matching one owned by Anto Krieger. So remember, Anto Krieger was the neo-separatist who planned a raid on Spellhouse that the ISB knew was coming, which Lonnie Young warned Luthen about, but Luthen chose to let the Empire catch Anto Krieger in order to keep Lonnie Young in place. We transition to the Yavin 4 base, where more X-Wings are parked on the strip, including at least one from the Blue Squadron. By 1 BBY, the rebels had evacuated Dantooine and shifted their operations to Yavin 4. Cassian, Melshi, and K2SO play a gambling game that seems to operate by the rules of Liar's Dice, where there are some tiles visible to all players on the table and some tiles kept private in your hand, and you up the bid based on how many 5s or how many 10s or whatever there are collectively. Luthen actor Stellan Skarsgård played Liar's Dice in his past Disney role Bootstrap Bill against his son Will Turner and Davy Jones in Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest. Now, the show's production confirmed this game is called Rianza, inspired by ancient Mahjong sets and dominoes. The tiles were designed by graphic designer Elle McKee, who crafted a full set of rules to play this game. Cassian and Melshi drink Revnog, that's the boozy drink that the Preox Morlana guards ordered in the first episode of Andor. K2SO says that they played 863 games. So a calendar year in Star Wars is equal to an Earth calendar year. So that means they have played this game at least twice a day, every day, since they switched over K2SO's programming. Krennic orders that Hirt blast Clea's mugshot as far and wide until she's found. This will later bite them in the ass, since because so many Imperial forces are consumed with this manhunt, backup forces to the apartment complex are slow to come. Now, Krennic doesn't want murder to be listed as a charge because that would mean they'd have to report a body and thus admit that Luthen Rael was Axis, and huge details about Project Stardust leaked. So instead, Partagaz suggests a different reason for the search.
She's diseased. She escaped the hospital with an infectious condition that threatens everyone with whom she may come in contact.
I love this. It recalls Partagaz's big speech back in season 1.
We are healthcare, providers. We treat sickness. We identify symptoms. The longer we wait to identify a disorder, the harder it is to treat the disease.
So in Partagaz's worldview, the rebellion is a kind of infectious disease that must be eradicated. Yes, this is a practical explanation that wouldn't publicly martyr Clea to any rebel sympathizers who might be out there helping her escape, and it would encourage people to keep away and be like, ugh, leper, gross! But yes, it shows how Partagaz has a sincere disgust with the spread of rebel ideology. Clea's pulse code comes through again, and Cassian and Melshi rush off to their U-wing, filing no flight plan so that no one will know where they are going, because they can't trust Draven and the rebel leadership, because the rebel leaders would probably let all of them burn if it meant keeping anyone from tracking them back to Yavin 4. K2SO says,
I've been counting the orders we've disobeyed so far. Would you like to know how many?
No.
17.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a version of Never Tell Me the Odds. Draven grills Willman in the Masasi Temple Strategy Center. We saw the set back in the 1977 film where General Dodonna and Leia and 3PO monitored the Battle of Yavin, and they rebuilt that set for Rogue One and brought it back here. The ISB tech is impressed with how Luthen and Clea's fractal radio spliced into an Imperial broadcast tower to avoid suspicion of energy charges and frequencies going in and out of this antique shop. And I love this because, as Luthen said in season 1, I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemies to defeat them. Melshi marvels at the sight of Coruscant's planet-wide cityscape, and K2SO brags that he was in a parade on Coruscant with 200 KX units.
The Emperor was there.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, I'm sure Cassian would have loved to have been within a sniper range of the Emperor, but also Cassian does not know that the Emperor is also a Sith Lord, and Cassian barely believes the Force is even a real thing anyway. Now, since the transmitter on the fractal radio still works, when Clea sends pulse codes to Cassian, Hirt's team detects it, and from here, the tension is palpable. We see every piece of hardware being used by the tactical team, their blasters, their armor, and the tech walking Partagaz through all their comms, so we feel like Cassian and Melshi are just outmatched in every way and unsuspecting of the heat coming in. Like, we know Cassian will escape all of this, but we are terrified watching the final minutes of this episode. Hirt traces the source of the radio, and the TAC team leader, Garial, says that they'll work their way up from floors 26, 27, and 28. So we know the rebel apartment is on floor 27, so they're gonna have a little time, but not much. Therefore, every word, every stutter, the speed at which Clea tells these details to Cassian, and how judgy Cassian is being of Clea's demeanor just because she's not Luthen, and the squabbling over whether to relocate to Yavin just becomes agonizing to the viewer because we are counting the seconds. We're screaming at our TV, move, move! This ISB SWAT ship was a design riff on the classic Lambda class Imperial shuttle first seen in Return of the Jedi. Now, because K2SO is initially just bored on the U-Wing, but then suspicious when he's unable to radio Cassian when ISB shows up, he steps in, and it's great.
Are you with us?
No.
But it only gives us so much hope as we end this episode on the cliffhanger of the TAC team moving down the corridor back to the elevator. And finally, to episode 12, Clea says,
Yavin. After all of this, what a bitter ending.
In Clea's eyes, Yavin is only the rebel cell that has doubted and scorned Luthen Rael's intel all these years. But Cassian, with the fated path hinted to him by the Force Healer, knows deep down that what they are doing on Yavin will lead to some future, even if it's a future not all of them will get to be part of. I mean, aren't all futures a future that we don't get to be part of? Unless some of you watching are like angels. Gariel hears Melshi walking out, and notice how he and his men point their guns down so Melshi wouldn't see their lights on the wall at first. I like that it is Melshi leading the three and being the one to be spotted, because Clea is the one face these three ISB wouldn't immediately recognize, so they corner them inside of the apartment. But Cassian says to leave the door open just because he might have the chance to get the drop on them as they round the corner. K2SO takes out the two ISB guys in front of the building, which gives us a little win because our hopes are about to be dashed. Gariel tosses in a stun grenade, which we see as a blinding flash of white that leaves Cassian afterwards in a blinding white haze. But since Melshi was behind the others, the stun wears off faster for him, and he can start blasting through the doorway as ISB enter. K2SO gets to floor 27 and grabs Hirt by the neck, leading to one of the most devastating deaths I've seen in Star Wars, as K2SO puppets Hirt as a human shield to take Gariel's blaster fire. Even though K2SO's metal shell is durable enough to resist most blaster fire, it's just a humiliation, really. What Darth Vader does to the Tantive 4 crew at the end of Rogue One, K2SO does to this ISB TAC team.
Cassian, I've cleared a path.
So they get out of there just as Partagaz's backup arrives. Like Dedra and her need to be right, Partagaz's obsession with trying to eradicate the rebel disease digs his own grave. Saw Gerrera holocalls with Mon Mothma and Bail Organa. He's now in his fully armored look as we saw him on Jedha in Rogue One, and his projection is misaligned so that his eyeline is over their heads. But they don't have time for such trivial details. Mon is also now in her robes and simpler haircut that she had in Rogue One, and of course when we later saw her in Return of the Jedi, because she now of course no longer has access to her Chandrillan design team.
Mother, you're dripping.
Now we did see Mon Mothma and Saw Gerrera tear into each other in a similar call on Yavin 4 in the Rebels Season 4 premiere, but that would have been before this moment when Mon and Erskine first arrived to the base. Mon blames Saw for picking off Imperial transports on Jedha, considering him a terrorist problematic to the rebel cause. They actually speak of him this way in Rogue One.
Yes, but Saw Gerrera is an extremist. He's been fighting on his own since he broke with the rebellion. His militancy has caused the Alliance a great many problems.
Saw blames Mon for sending him meddling squealers, suggesting that the partisan who embedded himself as the valet to that Moff who was captured, who squealed the details that led Dedra to Luthen, was someone Mon sent Saw Gerrera. And the reason paranoid Saw feels that he can trust his own info is that he uses Borgullet to sap the truth out of people. Draven meets with, hey, Admiral Raddus. Raddus is a Mon Calamari admiral whose flagship leads the fleet in the Battle of Scarif. He says,
"You're lucky Merrick's away. He'd go shoot it down himself."
General Antok Merrick, played by Ben Daniels in Rogue One, is the Blue Squadron leader who kicks some ass in Battle of Scarif in Rogue One, taking out a TIE Striker in a memorable moment. But alas, Merrick and all of the Blue Squadron are killed in the Battle of Scarif when the Death Star wipes out the base. So instead, 2 Gold Squadron X-Wings escort Cassian's U-Wing to the base, and Draven leads a attack team to greet them on the strip. We follow Draven and Cassian in a handheld shot into the room with the rebel leadership, including Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, Admiral Raddus, as well as Jonathan Eris returning from Rogue One as Senator Noor Jebel from the planet Uiter. He serves as a cranky Minister of Finance for the rebellion. Also, Sharon Duncan Brewster returns as Senator Tenra Pamlo, who serves as Minister of Education. She's from the planet Taurus, which is the opening planet in Knights of the Old Republic. Bale says that these senators already knew that Palpatine's energy project was a cover for some weapon, since they had voted to fund it. But as Mon points out that there was no oversight or inspections, they don't know what kind of weapon it was or what the details are. Now they have the context from Cassian via Clea, via Luthen, via Lana Young, via whoever accidentally forwarded this email to Dedra Miro. Kyber mining on Jedha, Calkite mining on Gorman, Galen Erso tinkering with all of this on Eadu. But the issue is they don't even believe that Luthen Rael is actually dead, because to them he's always been kind of an untrustworthy ghost. Cassian says that the last time he talked to Luthen was a year ago, which these senators scoff at, but Cassian looks right at Bail Organa when he says this.
When he had me rescue Senator Mothma from the Senate.
Duly noted.
Cassian is hinting to the fact that Bail Organa's extraction team was and had Luthen and his mole not discovered that, and had Luthen not arranged for an alternative extraction plan, Mon Mothma would be dead and would not have been able to provide the political shielding for these other 3 senators to get out of the Senate. So we see how this final half hour of Andor is not dedicated to some huge battle, because we're gonna get that in Rogue One, but rather to a heated debate over the life and times of Luthen Rael, whose real name, Lear, they don't even know. Is Bail Organa correct that Luthen burned too much and relied on such doubt, such deception, such paranoia that these rebels in his wake now cannot trust each other? Or did Luthen really spark countless embers filling the night sky, too small for them to see right now, but surely enough, burning and burning until the entire sky will look like the Eye of Aldhani? Cassian, for now, is silenced and grounded, but he does ask,
requesting permission to visit the infirmary.
Permission granted.
Mon backs him before anyone else can reply, because she knows this all depends on Clea's health and testimony. Draven tells Cassian that Saw's contact, Tivik, sent 3 urgent messages from Kafrene. So that tells us that Bodhi Rook, the Imperial pilot played by Riz Ahmed, has already defected and told Tivik that the Imperial weapon is, quote, a planet killer. That, plus Tivik confirming the name of Galen Erso, are the crucial pieces of secondary information that the rebellion will need to believe Luthen and Clea's story to be true. Like, if they only had one of these sources, they wouldn't have had enough to go on. In order to verify something is true, it has to come from 2 independent sources. Vel and Cassian toast fallen rebels.
Gorn, Nemik, Taramin,
Cinta,
the Gormans, Ferrex, your mother.
Gorn, Nemec, Terramin, and Cinta, along with Cassian and Vel, were part of the Aldani heist, the first 4 being dead now. Vel leaves out Arvel Skeen, Eben Moss Bachrach's character, because we learned at the end of that arc that he was betraying them. Vel also cites Marva, whose speech and funeral march lives on in the Ferrix Anvil gong every 3 episodes. I would have loved if they had remembered Brasso, whose sacrifice on Mina Rao meant Bix had a safe haven to go back to, but I guess there was no way for Cassian to know in this moment where Bix went, and maybe Vel doesn't bring up Brasso because it would remind Cassian of Mina Rao and think about Bix too much and maybe go back to visit her before embarking on these critical rebel missions, and maybe that's why Vel later tells Cassian, nah, check in with Bix, but like sometime later. Vel also mentions the Donnies, and they clink cups on Aldani.
I've heard people claim they were there when it happened.
I'd kill anyone I heard say that.
Oh shit. So in Skeleton Crew, which is like 10 to 15 years in the future after this, SM-33 painted a very grim picture of the planet Aldani.
Aldani? It's a sulfurous bog world.
So Aldani was not a sulfurous bog world in 5 BBY, so it sounds like as punishment for the Aldani heist, the Empire bombed Aldani with like some kind of chemical weapons or just did something else to terraform it into a sulfurous bog, making it impossible for any pilgriming Donnies to see the Eye of Aldani ever again. This is awful. And with this reminder of Aldani, we hear Alex Lothar's voice returning as Nemec, reading from his inspirational manifesto from season 1.
Random acts of insurrection are occurring constantly throughout the galaxy. There are whole armies, battalions that have no idea that they've already enlisted in the cause. Remember that the frontier of the rebellion is everywhere.
And we realize that this is not being listened to by any particular rebel in this moment, but by Major Leo Partagaz, as this particular part combats his rebel disease philosophy with much more eloquent phrasing.
The Imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks. It leaks. Authority is brittle.
Partagaz feels shaken, seen by this. And on the words, it breaks, it leaks, you can almost see Partagaz breaking and leaking tears. He indicates with regret that this recording is now making its way across airwaves.
Just keeps spreading, doesn't it?
Yes, it's now public, like Ezra Bridger's big speech on the radio in season 1, or Mon Mothma's speeches upon her departure from the Senate. This is yet another inspirational piece of audio that is causing the fire to spread. So this Imperial healthcare provider is realizing he cannot stop the spread of what he called a disease. And I think somewhere deep down he realizes, wait, what if it's spreading because it's not a disease, but it's white blood cells trying to cure the disease, and I'm the disease, I'm the rot. So he asks Legret,
who do you think it is?
Yeah, it's like he respects the game of his rival philosopher, and he finds it curious that its power is really in the fact that it comes from an anonymous source. Legret gives Partagaz a respectful moment alone, and Legret seems to know what's going to happen based on him waving back the stormtroopers after they hear the shot. Partagaz goes out in a similar fashion as Warden Norton in The Shawshank Redemption, recognizing he's been bested and refusing to become a prisoner in his own cage. Vel sees enough from Clea's despondent state, realizing that she never would have left Coruscant to Yavin unless it was over real intel. And from that, Mon believes it, and she and Draven give Cassian the green light to meet Tivik on Kafrene. So we see how Tony Gilroy structured all of this to be a victory earned by 100 different contributions of ordinary individuals, each committing brave acts, each following their hearts, trusting each other, even leaving their peaceful lives behind. Pretty much every character we've seen on this show fighting the good fight, even that Sinar fleet tech who had a crush on Cassian. She was as important as everyone else. It wasn't luck that tipped things their way. It was a gradual fire that they all fueled in different ways. Cassian dreams about his sister Carrie, the sister from Kinari whom Cassian sought, that really got him into this rebel cause. We get the sense that he never stopped dreaming of her.
Ever sleep well?
No.
Or maybe with his death coming days away, he'll soon be reunited with her. K2SO wakes him up.
Waking up humans is always confusing.
I love this. I kind of see it as a nod to Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sleep, the source material Blade Runner, and just this idea that droids like K2SO do not dream. They don't understand the concept of dreams, and they cannot process why humans are startled when they wake up as they return to their waking reality and are haunted by something. So Bail Organa tells Cassian to report to Draven for his orders on Kafrene, and he adds,
May the Force be with you, Captain.
I may be wrong, but I think this is the first time we hear May the Force be with you on the Andor series, and it comes right as Cassian will be thrust into the events of that Star Wars film. Like many a great series finale, we end with just the perfect montage. Cassian loads his A280 CFE heavy blaster pistol in his holster and pops on the jacket, giving himself the look he's gonna have at the start of Rogue One and the weapon he's gonna use to kill Tuvok after getting that information. He also waters his plants because Marva raised him right. Melshi leads drills, followed by Pow, the Drabatin rebel, who also joins the Rogue One crew to Scarif in the film. And one of the shots we see is Mon Mothma's husband, Perrin Clortha, now being driven with Runai, passed out drunk on his shoulder. Whoa. So Runai was the wife of Davos Skolden. We had a wife swap here and something happened. I want to know the tea. I'm wondering if Perrin might have cleared his name from his association with the disgraced Senator Mon Mothma by blaming Davos Skolden as the source of Mon Mothma's rebel funding, which Davo technically was, because they never would have found Tay Kolma after whatever Cinta did to him. So when the Empire arrested Davo, that would have left Runai, who we know loves taking shots at weddings, for the taken. So it leaves Perrin just kind of this interesting marriage where he has to play the game with the two of them just drinking themselves to the grave. But by far, the most devastating moment of this montage, Dedra Meero imprisoned on Narkina 5. Those are the same prisoner uniforms that Kino Loy and Cassian and Melshi had to wear. Holy shit! And it's a women's prison by the look of her cellmate. And perhaps the saddest part of this is that after the breakout, Narkina would have locked it down to prevent any future breakouts. And remember, the Narkina 5 prison builds pieces used in the hull of the Death Star. And even after this Death Star is completed, we know the Empire is gonna get right back to work on another Death Star. So really, there's no way out for Dedra. Cassian passes the Force Healer, who gives him a kind of Michael Caine and Dark Knight Rises nod. She knows the path he's walking will lead to his destined death, but she seems to be finding some healing in the fact that his path is so clear-eyed. The table's being set for Rogue One as we see Saw Gerrera gazing out from his partisan hideout on Jedha to see the plateau with a Star Destroyer hovering overhead. Krennic observes a Death Star with an open section awaiting the focus dish to be lowered into place, and we'll see that focus dish lowered into place in the opening act of Rogue One, and I kind of like how those two shots link together that way. K2SO is grateful to now have a flight plan.
It's so much easier when I know what we're doing.
I see this as a meta line by Tony Gilroy, who wrote this series, that he knew how the series would end, so he was able to just write his way up to it. But, you know, based on how dense the storytelling and characterization have been on the series, I doubt it was easy, but he at least didn't have to worry about the ending problem that plagues many screenwriters. We end the series back on Mina Rao as B2EMO plays like a doggy in the yard, racing a droid friend.
You could go again.
And we see Bix walking out into the wheat stalks, holding a baby, Cassian's child. The true reason she left Cassian, she was pregnant, and she knew that if he knew he had a child on the way, he never would have made the necessary sacrifices to lead the rebellion to victory. And again, if Brasso hadn't taken the step of lunging at that local Mina Rao farmer who housed them, the Empire would have known those farmers colluded with the rebels and probably burned their farm. So because Brasso made that sacrifice, these farmers were left alone, and now Bix has a safe community to raise Cassian's child in. As Bix looks at the sunrise and enjoys the warmth on her face, finally at peace, she doesn't seem to be waiting for Cassian, you know, like Elizabeth Turner, waiting for Will Turner to show up every 10 years, but rather, she's just at peace. I like to assume this was after the Battle of Yavin, and she knows what Cassian's sacrifice meant. She's literally creating what Luthen said is the ultimate sacrifice of every true rebel.
I burned my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
And that is what Cassian Andor did. And part of that sunrise is a child he'll never know existed. And this baby is not Poe Dameron. It's not. Stop it. Stop. Poe Dameron's parents were Kes Dameron and Shara Bey. No freaking way Tony Gilroy would have wanted us to take that away from this moment. What we are meant to take away is the sunrise that Bix sees here is meant to recall the sunset Cassian sees on the beach with Jyn Erso as the wave of destruction would come for them. Diego Luna said Cassian Andor intentionally left his eyes open for those final seconds. And now I feel like in that moment he could be gazing out at that horizon, looking for Bix, looking for his sister, looking for Marva, looking for any future descendants, and finding all of them. Also, if you watched all the way through the credits, which you should have, after a suite of Andor music, the music shifts into John Williams' Star Wars main theme. As emotional as this ending leaves us, we know on the other side of this sacrifice is a young pilot from Tatooine joining the Red Squadron on a daring trench run. And that completes our coverage of Andor. A huge thank you to all of you for joining us on this journey. These 24 episodes hit me on levels I did not expect. And I also want to thank our researcher Noah Chen and our programming director Brandon Barrick, who has helped me in ways I did not expect. Comment down below with your thoughts, and a special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Frederick Price, who supports us at the executive producer level. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all of our channels in the New Rockstars Network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.